Here we are. Hashihime of the old book town. Again, I don't know where we stopped. Oh, we was on the... I forgot the names. Fuck. I'm really bad at remembering names, so I'm sorry. Let's load the game, and here we are. It was the home of a nobleman, so of course it was a grand western-style residence. The neighbor's house was about as far as the distance between 2 streetcar stops. Just walking there was a lot of work. I tried shaking the iron gate first before ringing the doorbell. It seemed like I wouldn't be able to get in, so I rang the doorbell more than was necessary. When I did, sure enough, Kawase came out with an grayish look on his face. Kawase, I remember his name now. Thank you.
うるさいな。こんな日暮れに何の用だよ。
I'm here to solve the mystery. I'm here because I don't remember the name. I forgot his name.
寝てたら面倒なので叩き起こしてやったのだ。
復讐のつもりかい。
待て待て、話を聞いてくれ。
で、何？
これから水上の下宿先に行ってあいつの荷物をまとめるのだ。
Minakami. Thank you again.
水上の遺品は明日の朝まとめるつもりだけど。
Okay, so I know it's been a little bit while that this started, but again, just to summarize if you didn't watch the beginning, we had this 2/3 childhood friends, which is Kawase. Kawase is a toxic one. He is a shithead. He is a machinist. He is an horrible human being. And there is Minakami, who is lovely. He is amazing. He is stunning, spectacular, and he is the moment. Period. And then we have another one which didn't come up in the story yet. So to see him in the next part or in this one, I don't know. But what happened is that Minakami, spoiler, was killed. Someone killed him. Or he committed suicide. I believe someone killed him. Because he was too good for this world. Too good for this planet.
朝だと？遅すぎる。あのババアが水上の大事なものを捨ててしまうかもしれん。
そんなわけないでしょ。行くなら一人で行って。
釣れないことを言うな。な？
俺は玉森くんと違って忙しいんだ。ほら、帰った。
And we asked Momori-kun. He was annoyed about something. When I scrambled over the iron gate and landed on his side, he froze and his jaw dropped. He then turned his back to me and quickly headed back into the mansion. I immediately raced forward and somehow managed to catch up to him.
出てって。
This is Kawase. Say hi, Kawase. Say hi to Kawase.
頼む。
This is us. I swept up the droplets from my umbrella and flung them at Kawase. He instantly backed away from me until he was against the wall.
来たな。玉森くん、いい加減にしろよ。
お前はあのババアがどんな人間か知らないから安心できるのだ。
奥さんを嫌う理由もわかるけど、2年もタダで住まわせてもらっただけありがたいと思いなよ。
ありがたいものか。 私の飯はいつもみなかみの半分で、味噌汁の具だって合ってないようなものだった。
贅沢すぎるよ君は。
ともかく、面倒事を嫌うあのババアがこうしている間にも、みなかみの所持品を捨ててしまうかもしれんのだ。頼む、来てくれ、カーゼ。
うわっ、水気を飛ばすな。
なあ、頼む。
鬱陶しいやつだ。
Unreasonably stubborn, Kawase was becoming more and more angry. I thought his increasingly bad mood was due to the rain, but I suddenly noticed the dirty floor. A man's large footprints were plastered on its surface, and they weren't Kawase's.
誰か人を招いているな。
A lover.
だから君は帰れって言ってるんだよ。
Is his lover.
窮地の私と客人どちらを優先するのだ。
は？客人に決まってるでしょ。
Then all I had to do was make that guest leave. Kawase was a germaphobe, so he wouldn't be able to touch me as long as I flickered water at him. He wouldn't come after me. I proceeded to do so, putting some distance between us and showing myself to the parlor. With Kawase blocking my way, I had no trouble figuring out where it was. Once his back was completely against the door, though he glared at me as he trembled all over. It is his lover.
いい加減にしないと本気で怒るよ、玉森くん。
下宿先に行くと一言言えばいいのだ。
だから明日の朝行くって言ってるでしょ。
明日の朝では遅い。
君ってやつは。
Kawase would probably give in if we keep repeating this exchange over and over again, or so I thought. But neither his eyes nor his mouth relaxed.
どうせ水上の遺書でも探すつもりだろ。
そうではない。私が探したいのは。
I said before shutting my mouth. Perhaps realizing my true motives, the usual sneer came to Kawase's face.
俺を頼らないでくれる？自分のことは自分で。
川瀬、言ってやったらいいんじゃないか。
A deep, admonishing voice booming from behind Kawase. I didn't recognize it, but whoever it was sounded awfully friendly with Kawase. I tilted my head confused. He hated anyone casually calling him Kawase. Most importantly, his current last name was Ikeda. So the person had to be an old friend from before them. Since Kawase didn't have any other friends I knew about, and it couldn't possibly be him. Or could it?
川瀬、
黙ってて。
川瀬、俺の相手よりもそっちを優先してくれ。俺も水上の死について気になっていることがある。
お前、もしかして。
Who is it? Suddenly the doors shook. Kawase desperately and stubbornly secured them with his hands behind his back.
おい。
何にもない。何にもいないから。
これでいないはないだろ
う。Kawase finally turned his body around and pushed it against the doors.
玉森くん、早く帰ってくれ。
Oh my god, just show who it is already. Guess I had no choice. I put out my umbrella again, turned it towards Kawase and flapped it open and closed. Taking a hit from the spray, Kawase let out a low groan and moved away from the doors. When I put my hands on the doors in his place, he looked away with a face that seemed to say he didn't care anymore. Before I opened it myself, I knocked on the parlor door politely. His guest no longer seemed to be by the door, so I put my hands back on it.
失礼。
The soldier fell heavily into a chair. In his right hand was a pipe. On the table was a military-issued sword. I definitely recognized that stern face. He's our other friend that I talked earlier. Who would have thought?
花沢。
Hanazawa.
久しぶりだな、玉森。
Neither his eyes nor his brows moved an inch. Only his mouth moved to speak. His voice had changed, but it was unmistakably Hanazawa. Hanazawa.
久しぶりって何年音信不通だと思ってるんだ。
5年になるか。
5 years?
8年だよバカ。
8 years?
バカって君ね。
Kawase still looked immensely pissed. He watched me walk around Hanazawa like he was a fly. Why is he pissed? Does he like him?
さあ、早く帰ってよ。
I think he likes him.
ちょっと待て川瀬。これは一体どういうことだ。
I set my hand on Hanazawa's shoulder. As a man, I couldn't help but admire his well-built physique, which was apparent even through his uniform.
川瀬から何も聞いていなかったか。
Oh, so you are in a relationship?
ん
Hmm?
はあ ?3 ヶ月前から川瀬に会ってた
Oh.
ああ、
聞いてないぞ。むしろ花沢はどうしてるのかって話していたところだ。なんなんだお前。
What is Kawase hiding? Kawase made eye contact with Hanazawa.
黙るなよ。
これだから嫌なんだ。
Why he didn't want? Then this was all Kawase's idea? If Kawase had told me he'd seen Hanazawa, he wouldn't have to see me get so angry. Even more of a drift was formed between Kawase and I. With a cough, Hanazawa built a bridge between us.
ともかく、お前らのことは川瀬からよく聞いている。
It still is a really shitty move of him to get in contact with our friend and not tell us. Why?
私は川瀬から何も聞いていないがな。
Yeah.
聞かれなかったからね。
How many times had Hanazawa been brought up in conversation over the past 3 months? Saying he didn't tell me because I hadn't asked, that made me want to rewind time and point out that was a shameless lie.
花沢の前だと猫かぶりよって。
Yeah, he's just being innocent. He's being...
逆に考えられない。君にだけ鬼になるんだって。
お前ら本当に仲がいいな。
それはありえない。
Yeah. I couldn't help but being embarrassed by this cliche exchange. Kawase must have felt the same. He recrossed his leg with a short click on his tongue. He was a truly bitter man.
そんなことより花沢は今までどうしてたんだよ。
Somewhat surprised look came to Kawase's face, and he looked at Kanazawa. Had he really thought I wasn't going to ask? Kanazawa, on the other hand, opened his mouth without hesitation.
会津を出てから俺は東京の陸軍幼年学校に3年間身を置いていた。
金沢が15歳で私たちが12歳か。懐かしいな。幼年学校って厳しいんだろ？
厳しいと思ったことはないな。ただ柔道、剣道、毎日同じことの繰り返しだった。
Then it was harsh, but Hanazawa didn't seem to have found it difficult at all. His face, as he thought back on it, didn't look like the last bit glum. Just thinking about the day I took the Imperial University's entrance exam would make my face explode with emotion. So he was clearly much more disciplined than I was.
幼年学校の卒業後は第16師団野砲兵第22連隊での隊付き勤務を経て陸軍士官学校へ入校した。
第16師団野砲兵第22連隊って。
君本当に分かってる？
I didn't understand it at all. I was sure a 16th division existed in every country, but since it was Nazawa, it had a way of leaving an impression. I was thinking that when suddenly Hanazawa pulled a silver pocket watch from his breast pocket.
なんだこれ。
花沢は首席で卒業したんだ。それは恩師の銀時計だよ。
やろ
To me?
は？何言ってるんだよ花沢。こんなやつに。
Yeah, to me?
こんなやつとは失礼な。でも大事なものには違いないだろ？
Hanazawa shut his mouth, so I also accepted it without a word.
じゃあ今は相当偉く。
Achievement.
いや、その後俺は歩兵少尉として野砲兵第一連隊好きについていたが、今は訳あって浅草の方に下宿している。
浅草？なんでまた？
家賃が安いからだってさ。
Rent is cheap. Yeah, rent is high, guys. Kawase said indifferently.
陸軍幼年学校だって無理に入れてもらったんだ。給料を全額仕送りするのは当然だ。母と7人の姉を楽させるためにもな。
さらに切り詰めたいならここで暮らせばいいのに。この池田邸は元家族の家だ。いくらでも部屋はある。
俺もそう言ったんだけどね。
いくらでもあるくせに私に貸してくれなかったかな。
君は部屋を汚すから嫌だ。
Kawase said in annoyance as he lit a cigarette.
インクはこぼすわ、抜け毛は拾わないわ。何をしてるかと思えば空想小説の執筆だ。
何が悪い？お前こそ地球を汚さない生き方をしているとは思えない。
He blew cigarette smoke at me. Huh? This son of a bitch.
バッハッ貴様。
いいざまだよ。
楽しそうで何よりだ。てっきり落ち込んでいるかと思ったが。
I was suddenly dragged back to reality.
みなかみのことを川瀬から聞いたか？
ああ。残念だったな。
残念か。
こうして集まれたのはみなかみが呼び水になってくれたのかもしれない。
D- I'm not gonna say anything about this guy saying this when they literally didn't want me to see him.
花沢もあいつが自殺だと思ってるのか？
だから君。
自殺だろ。聞く限りではな。
I feel silent at his somewhat forceful remark. Hanazawa had this indescribable power of persuasion since way back. Even Kawase glanced at me to see how I would react. Even though I felt like arguing with him, I didn't. I didn't want to butt heads with Hanazawa. Not like I was accepting it. That was why I couldn't feel such deep regret or pray for him so easily. But I hated being looked at with such cold eyes.
コーヒーでも入れてくるよ。
Kawase is such a... How do I say it? Kawase coughed. It seemed on purpose, and then left the room. Now that I was left alone with Hanazawa, an unusually awkward mood filled the room. When my eyes met his, I managed to give him a tired smile.
花沢、結構変わったな。
You've changed for the better.
そうか。
うん。旅順要塞の視線を超えてきたかのような面構えだ。
Oh, I didn't saw it.
なんて。にゃはは。
Yeah.
確かに俺は変わったかもしれない。
I wouldn't have been able to agree if someone had asked me if I were acting like myself either. Even his confirmation was, well, as expected.
なあ、花沢、この時計やっぱりいらん。それも田舎に送ってやれば母親も喜ぶんじゃないのか？
あんなに欲しがっていたのにか。
え？
子供の頃、俺の時計を見て言っただろ。
Oh. Flashback. Tamamori. Give it. Hanazawa. No way, it's my dad's. Gimme it.
あの頃のお前は他人のものを欲しがってばかりだったな。
今は変わったのだ。
だから俺も変わった。やりたいからやる。黙って押し付けられてくれ。
ありがとう。
It was like he had become more stern, but also softer. I put away the silver-backed watch, adding a little weight to my pocket.
結局、今はどうしてるんだ？
本郷の研究所に勤務している。
研究所？航行学校とか陸軍大学には進まなかったのか？
ああ、知人に誘われて陸軍科学研究所の第三課地学的事項研究室にいる。
陸軍科学研究所の第三課地学的事項研究室。
よく覚えたな。
まるで私が書く空想小説のような舞台名だな。
俺もそう思
う。なあ、私もいつか見学しては。
ダメに決まってるでしょ。
Oh, it's his wife. His wife is here. Kawase quickly returned, annoyed. He placed the coffee on the table, crossed his feet, and shook them restlessly.
花沢に恥をかかせるなよ。
失礼な。私だって礼服くらい店主に借りればだな。ってあれ、私の分のコーヒーは？
He didn't bring one for me?
わかんないかな。長いして欲しくないんだよ。
Oh. I think we should just go.
むむ。
そう邪険にするな。
That's right. That's right. Stop making it so obvious that you don't want me here. But even Hanazawa could comfort me anymore, so I quickly stood.
もういい。帰ってやろう。
I come to his mouth. Kawase grinned. Surprisingly, when I rushed out of the room, he came to escort me to the front door.
お構いできなくてごめんね。
最低なやつだな。
人聞き悪いな。
When he opened the door, I was greeted by the wind and rain. The twisting lightning was bright like a smile.
うわ、ひどい雨だね。くれぐれも風には気をつけて。
楽しそうだな。
そりゃ楽しいさ。じゃあまた明日、水道橋でね。
私はいかん。
I dragged through the garden, looking back at Kawase only once. I put a hand on his sneering mouth.
おいカオセ、やらずの雨って知ってるか？
なんだって？
こう強い雨が降るときは友人を返すものではないということだ。
じゃあその友人ってのは俺にとっての花沢かな。
This is making me sad.
おやすみ玉森くん。
Honestly, it wasn't as tall. I couldn't understand why Kawase would keep reuniting with Hanazawa as a secret. I couldn't agree with it at all, but when it came down to it, I couldn't understand why. No, you can't understand why. It doesn't have a reason. It doesn't have a reason. You know, I think you've been too forgiveful to Kawase. That guy had worshipped Hanazawa since way back. Fuck him, I don't care. For instance, one time we only had one pastry in the house. We wondered if we should split it into 4 pieces or just not have any, but Kawase had taken over and presented it to Hanazawa. At time like this, it goes to Hanazawa, he said, as if it were a matter of fact. We have a place to Hanazawa. Hanazawa ended up showing us how to divide it evenly, but Minakami and I were just dumbfounded. In short, I guess Kawase was a childish kind of guy who liked to suck up to older people. He's not. He obviously has a place on Hanazawa. Obviously, it's so obvious. Anyway, Kawase seemed to be pretty familiar with what Hanazawa had been up to. If Kawase was denying that the old friend Minakami had gone to see was Hanazawa, then just who was it? Or was someone lying? I ended up going to the boys' new residence alone. Thanks to getting back and forth with Kawase, I feel like I was back to my old self. Even without his help, I could probably persuade a madam or two. I pressed the doorbell, and madam quickly appeared.
みなかみがお世話になりました。
彼は本当に素直で優しい青年でした。
あなたも気を落とさないでちょうだいね。はい。それでみなかみの手荷物を。手荷物の整理は明日、ご友人の方にお願いしているの。だからご遠慮しておくわ。
ちょっと待ってください。私はその友人に頼まれてきたんです。自分の代わりに荷物整理してくれと。
怪しいわ。
え
Madame narrowed her eyes. Her tongue seemed to writhe like a snake.
こんな夜分に荷物の整理もありますか？
本当にごめんなさい。ただ、私の気持ちの整理も今ついたところでして。
いいえ、今のあなたは冷静じゃないわ。ともかく、後のことは他の方に任せてありますから。
She slammed the door shut. I immediately jumped at it and desperately beat against it.
お願いします。私は別にやましい気持ちは、そう、荷物に一切手はつけませんから、あげてくれるだけでいいんです。
なおさら怪しいわ。
Yeah, that's almost which you're so bad at arguing. Slowly the light shut off. I fell back there to fall to my knees and smack my head against the door. I'll never be able to get in. I sighed and started to stagger my way back home. My black leather shoes continued to shine differently as I walked with my head lowered. Nakami had given me these leather shoes when we came to the capital. They were expensive ones from Ginza. I felt like as long as these shoes shined, I could never abandon my pride. Right, waiting to go into Minakami's room had nothing to do with packing up his stuff. What I wanted to search for was my pride and self-respect. I suddenly heard someone calling my name. When I turned around to see where and who it was coming from, Naoshi-kun was there. He was wearing some school uniform cap over his face, and for some reason he was smiling. I smiled back at him, but nothing came out except another tired sigh.
こんばんは、直し君。ひどい雨だね。
皆さん、死んじゃったんだってね。
Why are you saying this with a smile on your face?
ああ。
残念だね。タマさん一人ぼっちになっちゃったね。
It was kind of creepy, yeah.
一人ぼっちじゃないよ。私にはたくさんの友達がいるからね。帝大生の川瀬君に、陸軍軍人の花沢君。それにそう、君もいる。
Kawase is not a friend.
じゃあ寂しくないね。
寂しくないというわけじゃないが。
それじゃあおやすみなさい。
ところで直し君、一つ頼みたいことがあるんだ。
何？
みなかみの部屋に行ってとあるものを探してほしいんだ。
とあるもの？別にいいけど。探してきたら何くれる？
オムレツライスをおごろ。美味しいカフェがある。
カルスピもつけてくれる？
Coffee, a milk, uncarbonated soft drink known for its polka dot packaging that represent the Milky Way. Oh, I didn't know that.
もちろん安い安い。
Huh? Hanaoshi-kun always been this talkative?
原稿を探してきてほしいのだ。私が、いや、とある有名作家が書いた原稿で、私の宝物なのだ。
わかった。明日の朝も来るんでしょ。その時渡すね。
渡さなくてもいい。ただ、その原稿がどこにあったか教えてほしいんだ。
どうして？
ともかくだ。
押し入れの中にあったら探すの大変だな。
そんなはずはない。あいつが自宅で読むときは机以外で読まんのだ。
Damn, he's getting suspicious.
でも読んでなかったら？
だから、そんなはずはない。
Had Minakami actually read my manuscript? The answer would be clear if I could find out where it was. That was all I wanted to know.
変な人。
え？
Noshkan Jigo. He trailered his umbrella and skipped into the Oizumi residence. In this one conversation alone, we probably talked more than we ever had before. It must have been proof Naoshi-kun had opened his heart to me. No. His eyes looked as if he'd found a new toy. New toy? What is this weird kid idea? When the streetcar stopped at Suido Bridge, my ride home was immediately swarmed by salarymen. The windows were clouded, obscuring the landscape around Suido Bridge. Minakami must have constantly felt this heat whenever I came to Jimbosho. I blinked and suddenly there was no other passengers. When I looked around in confusion, the conductor was also gone, but the strangest of all, the scene outside had changed. Exclamation point. When I turned back to the interior of the streetcar, Haruhiko-san and the frogman were calmly sitting there for some reason.
何勝手に現れてるんですか？
原稿を読んだか読んでないか、そんなに重要かね。
I think it is important.
だから勝手に話を進めないでください。
He started back at me. Being watched by someone like him was stifling, so I ended up turning away.
私にとっては重要なんです。
オラにはさっぱりわからんな。
僕にもさっぱりわかりません。
Shut
あ
up.
の原稿に何か特別な意味合いでもあるのかね。
Annoyed eyes met my knees.
早く幻想を解いてください。
ガテンが行けばすぐにでも解放してあげよう。
あの物語は地下室の怪人は未完なんです。
未完とは。
Unfinished meant that there was still more left. Minakami reading my manuscript and then dying, and him dying without having read it without having read it, had totally different implications.
それを知ってどうするんですか？
I don't know. He don't know.
だって水上さんは殺されたんでしょ？
水上くんの死は自殺ではないと君は言っていたはずだ。
どちらにしろ結末を知らずに死んだなんてかわいそうだな。
I glared at the frogman. he let out a yelp before he and Haruhiko-san disappeared. And everything is back to normal. The next time I blinked, I was standing between filthy slaughtermen again. Jimbo Show, the conductor announced lazily. Moving only my eyes, I looked around, searching for anything out of the ordinary. My hallucinations seemed to have disappeared. I swallowed and let out a sigh of relief. When I got back to Ambassador, the lights were on, even though it was way past closing.
博士閉店とっくに過ぎていますよ。
Professor is still here?
玉森くん、君のお帰りを待っていたんです。
Oh, he's been waiting for us. Professor is the cutest one. I forgot to talk about him. Professor was sitting politely behind the register. I never said that straight, even on my first day of work. And sure enough, as soon as Professor stood up, he fell back down.
大丈夫ですか？
ごめんなさい。足をつっちゃったみたいで。
3時間正座してたんですか？
For 3 hours?
ええ。いつお客さんが来るかもわからないので。
Damn.
すみません。気を使わせてしまって。
No, on one side you have Kawase, which is a piece of shit, and the other side you have Professor. He stood here 3 hours for us. And Kawase was being a piece of shit with us.
いいんですよ。それにここに君が座っていたかと思うとドキドキして。
He's a little bit creepy, also. Yeah.
ごめんなさい、ごめんなさい。気持ち悪くてごめんなさい。
He really was creepy. Perhaps noticing my unamused expression, he began to gather his things. He looked like he would cry at any moment.
長居してごめんなさい。僕帰りますね。
待ってください。
Without thinking, he grabbed his sleeve and as he was leaving. What was I doing? But since I had already grabbed his hand, I couldn't show him any more weakness.
少し付き合ってくれませんか？私のプライドを守るのに。
そりゃあもう君は素晴らしい大作家様です。
What?
そうですか。
君の物語を見ているとまるで夢を見ているような影を追っているような心地がするのです。
そうですか、そうですか。
Professor Neo, I sat down on my chair with a thumb and hear his thoughts on my manuscript. The professor sighed with a ha. With a I could hear admiration times 100. When he sighed with an I could hear 200 times more applause. It was no longer Mabashido. It was a room in a grand palace. And of course, I was wearing a splendid crown on my head.
最初の出会いは忘れもしません。だって店内に入ったら店員さんが床に突っ伏して原稿を書き殴っているんですから。言葉遊びを得意とし、 目と心を楽しませる夏季校舎。
そういうあなたは未号者だ。
Good eye for talent.
ああ、恐れ多い、恐れ多いです玉森くん。それに見てください、君が開いたこの幻想。
You can see the illusion? The Vicer stood up and twirled. Look at him. He spread his arms out wide and went outside to the palace garden.
暁の透き通った青い光、うつらうつら瞬く星。ここは白髪小僧の蘭願国の宮殿でしょう。
え
Now that you mention it, it may have been similar to the flower garden, the fountain, the sky full of stars, even in the morning. I slowly took off my crown and carefully placed it on my lap.
僕は昔から類光や旧作のファンなのです。
旧作って夢の旧作？
はい、1915年に彗星のごとく現れた奇才作家夢の旧作のことです。
For just a moment, I remember Minakami's profile as he read Diagram.
やはり僕の目に狂いはなかった。君も旧作に惹かれているんでしょ。言葉にしなくともわかります。ああ、美しいな。
ここが白髪小僧の蘭願国で、その宮殿だとすれば、私が蘭願王ということですか。
でしたら私は赤オウムとなりましょう。
私をうつけでのんきでだんまりの蘭願王と見ていたのですか？
いえいえ、とんでもありません。
あなたは赤オウムなどより詭弁家の青目じいがふさわしい。
君がそう望むのなら青目じいでも構いません。でも嬉しい、君がそこまで旧作を読み込んでいると。だからでしょうか、君の書く物語はどこかその旧作に似ているというか。
勘違いするな。
I briskly walked towards him and snatched my manuscript out of his hands. The illusion faded at the same time, and our minds returned to Umabashido. Before my anger, the rest were frozen in shock. Then he smiled, rallied at his hands as they held into nothing.
旧作に似ていると言ったのは3時のつもりだったんですが。
独創性を求める作家に対し別の作家に似ているなんてどういう了見ですか？
そんなつもりは。ごめんなさい。
二番煎じとでも言いたいのですか？
違います。僕はただ
一番煎じの茶がうまいと思うなら帰ってください。
I was going to turn around and slam the door, but I couldn't easily picture Professor's frantic trembling. How pathetic. I felt terrible. I was throwing a temper tantrum.
帰ってください。今日の私は機嫌が悪い。
じゃあ褒めてくれって言ったのは。
誰でもいいからご機嫌を取ってほしかっただけです。誰でもいい。
As I repeated that I lay down, even Professor would get offended and leave if I fell asleep.
玉森くん、少しだけ僕の身の上話を聞いてくれませんか？僕は浅草のとある酒造の息子なんです。人よりちょっと裕福で、お金だけはいつも持っていました。
kept on talking anyway. I lifted myself up as I cursed him in my mind. It wasn't like I was responding to the word money or anything.
ある日、いつも通り吾妻橋から隅田川を眺めていたら、
Professor's story. A vibrant came up to me. What happened to your eye? It plopped down into the river. Is that why you were searching the water?
ちょっと待ってください。一体何の話ですか？
僕が本を読むようになったきっかけのお話です。
Okay. That's dangerous, young man. Still, I have to look for it. You won't find it here. You won't find it. See, look. Your eye is right here. The dragon showed me his clenched fist. I came down from the railing and went to open his hand, but there was nothing in it. The man smiled and requested my hand as we crossed Azuma Bridge together. Oji-san, why are you so dirty? Oh, that's just how I am. I haven't bathed in a while. I'll give you money. That's your precious money. I won't take a single cent. But I feel bad for you. You're a good kid. When I handed him all the money I had, the man responded with a soft sigh. In that case, I'll grant you one wish. My eyes are bad, so I can't read books. I see. So please, tell me a story.
そうして語ってくれたのは地下室に住む怪人の話でした。
地下室に住む怪人の話？
はい。子供に聞かせるにはあまりにも怪奇的なお話でした。僕はそれ以来、怪奇小説、怪奇映画、怪奇談に陶酔し、今に至るのです。
目は大丈夫なんですか？
はい。昼間に10ページずつゆっくり読んでいますから。
楽しいですか？
そりゃもう、あの時出会ったおじさんはきっと怪奇作家。あの人の作品を探すために僕は古今東西の本屋を巡り歩いていたのです。
はあ。
そこで僕は君に出会った。
え？私？
君もあの不思議なおじさんにどこかで出会ったのでしょ？それは今日この原稿を読んで確信しました。
え？
だってこの物語はあの日あの時聞いた物語と一緒だから。
そんなバカな。
ああ、神様は本当にいるんだ。僕にもう一度この物語に出会わせてくれるなんて。
Somehow this was turning out much different from what I had expected.
帰ってください。私はそんな親父会ったことも聞いたこともない。
でもだとしたらこの物語は一体どこで？
これは私の物語です。誰の影響も受けていないし盗作でもない。
盗作だなんて思ってません。
そう言ってるようなもんでしょうか。そしてあれを見ろ。
I was pointing at a door in the floor.
私はあそこにある扉を見てこの話を思いついたのです。ある日あそこの戸が揺れているのが見えたんです。多分ネズミか何かの仕業でしょうが。
それで地下室に住む怪人を？
そうです。そしてよくわかりました。
Damn. I came out from behind the register. I walked right up and thrust my pen at him.
貴様は私の原稿を盗み見、そしておめめがどうしたとかいう奇妙な男の話をでっち上げた。
でっち上げてなんかいません。
いや違いない。
そんな。
私に運命を感じさせるようなことを言うのは何かよからぬことを企んでいるからだ。
違います。だって嘘なんかついたら嫌われちゃうじゃないですか。
何を企んでいる？
企んでなんか。あ、いや、企画ならあります。
Planning something? He said that he pulled up a check from his side. I fixed my gaze on it. A professor flashed his finest smile next to the check.
500円です。
500 yen?
500円？
君の物語を出版社に持ち込みましょう。
The publisher.
え？
本にしてもらうんです。
Please?
誰の金で？
だからこの僕のお金で。
貴様はどうしてそこまで？
Because he likes you.
言ってるじゃないですか。君の信者だからですよ。
That's accounts.
犬です。猿です。僕と書いて下僕と読みます。
Your dog, your monkey?
君のためなら安いものです。
As long as it's for
そしてこれは僕のためでもあるんです。
For me? What a charitable guy, saying he was doing it for himself and finding joy in making someone else's dream reality. Up until now, there had never been anyone who would say those kind of words to me. No.
さあ、玉森くん、お手に取ってください。僕の気持ちをどうぞ。
Can I accept? He held up the check with both hands. 500 yen. If I were bottles of Cosby, I could buy 625 of them. If they were watered down, I could drink Cosby 5,000 times. However, the moment it moved from Professor's hand into mine, the deck felt awfully light. It was really nothing more than a scrap of paper. The same as manuscripts, newspaper, and books. If they weren't bound together, they could easily be blown away. That felt a little ridiculous. I ripped the check to shreds and tossed it. When do I get to choose it, you know? When do I get to choose? When do I get to make the choices for this man?
帰れ！
玉森くん、
これ以上私をバカにするな！
There was no way something so promising was real. I turned Professor around and pushed him as hard as I could. He grabbed two of the frames out the bookshelves to either side. He held himself back, looking desperate.
バカになんかしていません。僕は君のことが。
黙れ、想像し。500円は旧西軍にでも寄付して世に役立てろ。
I shoved him out into the rain. After that, I threw his unusual bottom-laced umbrella on his head.
さっさと帰れ！その頭、お大事にな。
ああ、そのお気遣いありがとうございます。
I slammed the door shut, cutting off the last syllable. The shopper finally closed. I sat down in front of the door and pull out the silver-packed watch. I just remember I had. The shopkeeper was normally asleep at this hour, so it was my fault. The light in his room was on.
すみません。
いえいえ。
Damn.
お客さんは大事にね。
Treat the customer with care. Literally just throw a guy out. Just throw the guy out because he was going to confess his love to me. Nothing. No big deal. Right, even Professor was a customer. Oh, really? The light in the shopkeeper's room turned off. He hadn't asked me about today's or yesterday's sale again. I felt thankful for that, purely because I was an awful human being. Even waiting, Professor's critic was proof I was a sorry excuse of a human being. I was already looking for someone to replace Minakami. Damn. I did a lamp to replace the lights I turned off on the first floor. The lamp light shouldn't disturb the shopkeeper's sleep. I thought as I slowly touched the books, one by one, my footsteps not making a sound. When I blinked, what I saw was Minakami's profile as he read a book. This book, that book, too. The notebook where he constantly wrote his impressions was in his hand. He had never let me see his notebook, but in the same way cavemen drew pictures of the animals he hunted, that was the only thing I had been able to think of that would be in there. However, the moment I opened that notebook for the first time at the morgue, my mind had gone blank. Those written thoughts were like love letters to each work. He wrote about which lines he found beautiful, about which scenes he was crazy about. It would have been something more perverted if there had been Simmons things on the pages. What? But Minakami was pure to the end, and what he written was composed out of love for each story. Oh, alright. That scared me for a moment. What the hell? What he wrote about Kiyasako, whom I despised, was long, so long, so long. I could hide my shock at seeing Minakami's lifeless face a lot more easily than I could hide the shock from seeing the truth of that notebook. Why wasn't my name in there? Damn. I despised Kiyosako for a long time. Girl hell. Professor Inugami. The white hair boy. Dr. Magra. I had never seen Minakami look as amused as when he was reading those. I guess I could say I hated Kiyasako because of how much Minakami enjoyed him. I guess I could say I actually wanted to throw out that copy of Dr. Magra he had given me the day before yesterday. Throw out. I didn't have to say it. Even now, the same anger I felt welling up from the bottom of my heart when I saw Minakami's notebook hadn't stopped. It was ridiculous. I was jealous of a man named Kyosaku Yumeno, someone I didn't even know really existed or not. Plus, it wasn't as a writer. It was because he had been the only one able to captivate a man like Minakami.
玉森くん、
Oh. Haruhiko-san appeared from the darkness.
嘘はよろしくないな。
嘘？私は何も嘘など。
君も夢の旧作を愛していたはずだ。少女地獄、犬神博士、白髪小僧、そしてドグラマグラも、君はすでに独立している。
なんでそんなこと。
君がオラで、オラが君だからだ。
What?
にゃっは、だったら仕方ないことですね。
Since no one was around, including Minakami, there was something I could say now. I loved Kyosaku too.
旧作が面白いのは、物語の中に物語があることなんです。そういうのを入れ子構造って言って、別に珍しい表現方法じゃないんですが、旧作の場合は、その入れ子構造が読者の世界にまで及ぶんです。だから読んでいると、あたかも自分に語りかけられるような気になってくる。読了したはずなのに、どこかで物語が続いているような気がしてくる。それが旧作の魅力なんです。
よく読み込んでいるね。
最新刊のドグラマグラは旧作の集大成です。物語の最後が物語の冒頭へと続くようになっている。
まるでウロボロスだ。
Ouroboros. Love this word. It's one of my favorite words. Ouroboros. I instantly returned to my senses. I had been talking to pull myself together, but I had heard another term I didn't understand.
っていうか、春彦さん、あなた一体何なんですか？
しがない君の幻想だよ。
Hallucination.
そうですよ。僕たちは玉森さんの幻想です。
帰る男は黙ってろ。
I murmured as I walked around. Haruhiko-san. When I peered into his large glasses, his face didn't even twitch.
何かね。オラに言いたいことがあるなら、はっきり言いなさい。
Well, even this was possible, I suppose. Compared to Hyde, the other personality of the main character in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Haruhiko-san seemed to be much more intelligent and wise. He probably wouldn't be bothered by me walking around him for a while either.
私の幻想なら、こうして話している会話は他人に聞かれないということですね。
君が変人扱いされることはない。
The idea of these prosaic thoughts leaking out into the world was scary enough.
ならいいんです。もう変人扱いされるのは嫌なんで。春彦さん？
His long glasses reflect the sound of the rain. Who is that? When I turned around and followed his gaze, there was a man standing there. He had no umbrella and was wearing a funny mask. The man I had heard about somewhere opened the doors to Umabashiro. I froze, dumbfounded. Run.
閉店してますが。
Don't you lock the door? What a creepy mask. I didn't know much about No, so I wasn't sure what emotion the one he was wearing represented. Oh, that was creepy No mask. A creepy No mask.
おい、聞いているのか？
Why is it so close? The eyes on the mask were opened wide, so I wasn't sure which one of us was more shocked. He had come to get out of the rain. If at all possible, I wanted that to be the case. If you want to rest, you should, but you can't stay here. I'm going upstairs to bed. As soon as I was about to do just that, he slowly stretched out his leg. When his pace seemed to suddenly quicken, I moved behind a bookshelf. His footsteps were soundless. I thought he were moving across clouds. Then the man came right up to me and looked straight at me to the bookshelf. Mm.
玉森くん、逃げなさい。
え？
早く。
Without a word, I quickened my pace towards the exit. The man began to move behind the bookshelves and sync with me. He came out from the shelves before me and blocked my escape route with his large body. Lightning illuminated a black silhouette. My late father must have felt like this when he came across that bear. I let out a scream that was something between a laugh and a cry as I ran by the man and out into the rain with nothing but the clothes on my back. When I looked back to check, the man was hot on my heels. I just barely managed to jump over a puddle. That's when I tripped, dirtying my hands and knees. I jumped into an alley the giant probably wouldn't be able to get through, and I fled toward Hakusumi Street. The town was as silent as the grave. I wanted to run away to somewhere bright, even remotely bright. I ran around, wondering if there were any shops open, but everyone was fast asleep. My teeth shattered from the cold. That was the phantom, without a doubt. The giant of Jimbocho, the giant over 6 feet tall. But why?
なんで怪人が私を。
Where are we now? I ran like mad until I reached Suido Bridge. But there was a man in a black mantle standing there. I was trying to get to the police station that lay ahead. When I found myself blocked by that figure, my life gave out.
何なのだ一体。貴様は一体何なのだ。
The man swiftly turned around and, despite the rain, removed his hood.
玉森
Hanazawa.
花沢。
I switched car drove by behind me and the metal bridge crackled. Blinded by the lights, Hanazawa put his hood back on. The sound of people's voice came out of the station. Once they had passed us, and their voices were just a whisper, Hanazawa finally began to speak.
どうした？
What a common voice he had. Mutamasu told him about what had happened, but nothing came out but foam.
傘はどうした？風邪をひくぞ。
傘は、にゃは。
何かあったのか？
Hanazawa approached me and held out his hand. When I quickly grabbed it, he pulled me up with an immense strength.
おまわりに行くのだ。私は今。
今？
I gave up continuing my sentence. I couldn't bear Hanazawa's gaze as he listened to me without speaking.
また幻覚を見たのか？
幻覚じゃない。今度のは本当に幻覚じゃないのだ。夢でもない。そんな目で見ないでくれ。
Hanazawa was the only one I didn't want thinking I was a lunatic. He had probably heard people talking about me behind my back countless times. Still, I didn't want to lose the person who had called me his little brother. When I ran my troubled gaze across the river, I felt like I was being swallowed up, and it started to scare me.
場を移すか？
After that, we walked about 30 steps and relaxed under the overpass at Tweedo Bridge Station. I wrung out my sleeve. The dripping water made me nauseous.
どうして花沢はここにいたんだ？
水上の死の理由について考えていた。
陸軍がか？
いや、こんななりのまま出てきたが、ただの友人のよしみだ。弔い方法を探してると思ってくれ。
弔いか。それ、私にも手伝えないかな。私は水上の死を自殺とは思っていないのだ。昨日までニコニコしていたやつがドボンと死ぬはずがない。そもそもあいつは仏教徒だ。きっとこれは自殺に見せかけた他殺なのだ。
黒幕がいると。
Of course.
そう、それに私は怪しい男を知っている。この神保町に近頃不気味な怪人が出るのだ。実は私はさっきそいつに追いかけられてここまで。
I got here. There was no way he'd believe such a thing. I smacked the back of my head against the wall, wanting to take back what I said.
ごめん、聞かなかったことにしてくれ。
俺は信じるぞ。心当たりがある限り片っ端から探っていこう。
花沢
I reached to Hanazawa's mentor and took his hand.
梅鉢堂来てくれるか？私の寝床に怪人が潜んでいるかもしれんのだ。なあなあ、来てくれるか？
言ってやろう。その幻覚、俺が叩き切ってやる。
I'm listening.
ここが梅鉢堂か。
扉が閉まってる。
I had flung those doors open and run out.
室内に隠れているかもしれない。
安心して眠れそうか？
We had searched every corner for shadows for 30 minutes. The bathroom, the back of the shop, my room on the second floor, but the man wasn't there. That was why I couldn't relax.
梅鉢堂は鍵がないのだ。また押し入られるかもしれん。もう少しだけここにいてくれないか。
気が済むまでいてやろ
A reliable guy. When I turned to him, my hands clapped together, and my eyes watering, he had nodded unquestioningly.
う。俺もお前とは二人きりで話をしたかったから。
Okay.
私もだ。テートに来てからお前はどうしているかとずっと考えていた。なのにカーセのやつ。
さっきも言ったが、お前らのことは川瀬からよく聞いていた。俺の方から会いに行くべきだった。さすれば、水上にも会えただろう。後悔している。
Hanazawa said, remembering Minakami as he looked up at the top of the bookshelves. Maybe it was because Hanazawa was older, but it hadn't been in his nature to boss us around when he wanted to do something. He'd always put Kawase and I first, and he would lower his head in shame to cover for whatever bad thing we did. There had been a time when I internally hated that. Among us was the well-behaved and modest Minakami. He must have been the only one Hanazawa didn't have to worry about. Whenever I saw him give Minakami a book he couldn't read to me, I would get jealous of both of them. I wonder how Hanazawa viewed the days we spent in the Aizu countryside. When I started closely at his profile, he looked down at me and spoke.
帝大にある本も水上は読破したんだってな。
ああ、この梅鉢島の本だって読み尽くしたよ。
さすがというか、相変わらずというか。
そしてついには一冊寄贈してくれた。
なんという本だ。
ドグラマグラ。
夢の旧作か。あいつらしい。
お前も旧作を知っているのか？
ああ、読んだことはないが、最近友人がドグラマグラを読んでいた。怪奇好きのお前ならとっくに読んだだろう。
旧作なんて読んだことない。私はどちらかというとルイコのような伏線のあるミステリが好きだからな。
そうか。
どのみち本読みなんて暇人の趣味だ。
嫌に自虐的だな。
I was the one who had brought up Kazuko. I didn't even want to talk to Hanazo about him. As soon as I looked away, the conversation reached its end.
さて、俺は帰るぞ。今夜も冷える。暖かくして寝ろよ。
待ってくれ。浅草に帰るのか？
いや、研究所に戻る。
ずうずうしいお願いだが、今夜私もそこに泊めてもらえないだろうか？
No.
今夜の梅鉢堂はどこかおかしい。
今のお前は疲れている。明日になれば悪夢も覚めるだろう。
花沢。
A dream, a hallucination. That's all it was to everyone after all.
一箇所だけ探していないとこがある。
I muttered hesitantly. If that didn't make him turn around, I had no intention of saying anything else.
どこだ？
I knew Hanazawa wasn't a heartless person. I led him to the door that went to the basement. It's such a tiny door. I don't know the perspective, but it looks so tiny. When Hanazaba pulled the handle, his body just shook. The door didn't budge at all.
鍵がかかってるな。
なんだ、ただの貯蔵庫か。
いや、内側から鍵がかかっている。
内側？
There's a lid. Didn't seem to be a keyhole. There's no. Yeah, I was gonna say that there's no keyhole. How is this door locked?
でも、鍵がかかってるなら安心だ。
ここは探さなくていいのか。
ああ。
念には念を入れるべきだと思うが。
Hanwaz said as he smoothly put out his sword. Illuminated by the light of the lamp, the blades shine brightly. Hanazawa held it up gallantly, then began to saw around the handle.
なんだそのおかしな刀は。
友人が考案したノコギリ軍刀だ。まさかこんなところで役に立つとは。
変な友人だ。
Remove the handle.
っておい、さすがに天使に怒られる。
後で陸軍が保証してやる。
What a convenient title he held. Hanazawa grabbed the edge of the hole he cut out and opened the door without hesitating. I couldn't see the bottom. It was pitch black. A cold red showed my feet. When I lowered the lamp into the darkness, it illuminated part of a path that continued on into the unknown. I raised my head again and looked around the bookstore. The world hadn't changed. The scene spreading before me was unbelievable enough to give me the sort of doubt.
防空壕か。しかし何のために。
そっとしておこうか。
なぜだ。この下に人がいるとは思わんのか。
だが、人が登ってこられる高さじゃない。
There were no stairs either. If I went down there, I probably wouldn't be able to climb back out. The same went for Hanazawa.
ならば椅子を下ろせばいい。
Without getting an okay, Hanazawa lowered us two into the basement. Then he readily jumped down into the darkness, which was at least 10 feet deep.
おい、花沢、勝手すぎるぞ。
お前も来い。
え
Hanazawa had taken the lamp. When I looked around, the shop had become excessively eerie. As soon as I hesitantly lowered my legs, Hanazawa reached out from below with both hands.
足乗せるぞ。
ああ、どんと来い。
My hand slipped and I was swallowed up by the hole. Hanazawa easily caught me in his arms and gently set me down like I was a baby.
すまん。
しかしなんだ、ここは。
I looked up, but I knew there was no way my hands could reach. It was so high, I would have to jump from the top of the stool to actually reach the hole. I couldn't believe I'd willingly step foot into a place like this.
この店はいつから建っている。
さあ、聞いたこともない。でもこんなのただの家にはありえないよな。
The air was damp. I knew I could never say it out loud, but there was also a familiar stench.
よーし、帰ろう、花沢。
この異臭はどこから来るのだろ
手だから勝手に進むなよ。
Hanazawa was the one in charge of the lamp. If I didn't follow him, I would be left alone in the darkness. Damn, Hanazawa. When I reluctantly started to follow, a glare on my face, he suddenly stopped and touched the wall.
見ろ玉森、これは人が爪で引っかいた跡だ。
What? I lifted my chin, narrowed my eyes, and hesitantly looked at Hanazawa's fingertip. There were scratch marks carved into the stone wall. I saw that this was no laughing matter after all.
花沢、頼む、頼む、引き返してくれ。
怖いなら一人で帰っていいぞ。
だが、ランプだけは返してほしい。
Surprisingly, he handed the lamp to me without a fight. Mazana put out a rod the length of his palm and turned it on. When he did, the tip flickered and illuminated the darkness far ahead. It was like a sword made of
携
light.
帯ランプといってな。これも友人の発明だ。
A lantern.
物好きな天才もいたものだ。
いつか合わせてやる。それじゃあな。
一人でも行くな。
Grab his sleeve.
こんな時に言うのもあれかもしれないが、お前、結構勝手なところあるぞ。年上だから仕方ないかもしれないけど、幼年学校に行った時もそうだ。私たちに何の相談もなく。
なんだいきなり。
私に嫌なところがあれば直す。だからお願いだ。戻ろう。
Even I knew I was talking about something totally off topic. But it stopped Hanazawa, so any reason was fine.
花沢、頼む。
こんな俺にしたのはお前だぞ、玉森。
When he saw my troubled face, Hanazawa suddenly smiled. He hid it immediately, but I had a feeling he was enjoying this.
今だから言えることがある。俺もお前の書く物語が好きだった。
え？
Back then, Hanazawa never said a word when he listened to my stories. He would just cross his arms and quietly listen to Kawase's insults. Only Minakami would smile and say, I thought it was interesting.
俺も水上と同じ感想だった。俺が陸軍科学研究所なぞ怪しいところに流れ着いたのも全部お前の責任だ。
私？
聞かせてくれただろう。
A story of the best. Hey everyone, I finished a new story. Hey, enough already. It's about the strongest weapon ever thought up. The Shiaboriyama bomber. Shiaboriyama or neighborhood? It's a battle weapon put together by military intelligence. I think it's great. Are you stupid, Minakami? It's dumb. You think so too, right, Hanazawa? Silence.
背炙り山、いいと思う。
いいよな。
The entirety of the Shiburiyama was painted in silver. It would drop bombs reflecting the sunlight as it melted into the sky. But now it was just a childish fantasy. Of course, there was no way an aircraft that heavily could fly.
陸軍の教育は退屈だった。剣術も砲術も何もかも。玉森がいれば、そう考えたこともあった。
Hmm.
そんな時に今の友人に出会ったんだ。
じゃあその人に誘われて陸軍科学研究所の第三課地学的事項研究に携わっているのか。
Such a big name.
本当に覚えが早いな。
Yeah.
高なる単語には強いのだって勝手に先に行くな。
背炙り山は敵地に着く前に自壊する。確かそんな最後だったよな。
ああ、
自壊の知らせを聞いた4人の研究者たちはやはりと心でうなずきつつも悔しがるふりをした。
奇跡を信じた研究者たちの愚かな話だ。
だが自壊に至ったのは研究者たちのせいではないと当時の俺は思っていた。
え、
お前に知識がなかったからだ。それが背炙り山が大破した本当の原因だ。
確かにあの頃の私に飛行機の知識はなかった。今もあるとは思えない。だがそれとこれに何の意味が。
あの時お前に足りなかったのは知識だ。そして今のお前の物語には恐怖が足りない。
Fear. He hadn't even read it, and yet he was spot
こ
on.
こで恐怖を体験すれば川瀬も喜ぶ物語が書けるんじゃないか。
川瀬から聞いたのか。
At the moment, I was certainly feeling fear. The strain, stench, the nail marks, the chill, the darkness. Wasn't there someone watching us from the gloom where the light didn't reach?
私も行く。
何かあれば俺が叩き切る。安心しろ。
Thank you, Hanazawa. I gave him a helpless smile. Hanazawa smiled at me again. I couldn't understand how he was enjoying the situation. Even if he did see the monster, Hanazawa probably wouldn't back down. Maybe I really did plant the seeds of curiosity in Hanazawa long ago. Even so, the simple interpretation was basically just passing the blame to me. He had been adventurous since way back, totally uninhibited. No one could ever imagine it from the way he looked, but he was an adventurer. I was probably the only one who knew that. Hanazawa suddenly stopped in his tracks. After turning 2 corners, he saw a door ahead. But the stench was growing stronger, and even the darkness seemed to be getting deeper. It may have been an enticing fragrance for flies or any other insect that like its strong smells, but to me it was like a signal of some unseen danger. No one needed to tell me that going any further was strictly forbidden.
残念、何もなかったな。
行くぞ。
残念だな、本当に残念だ。引き返すしかあるまい。
Nazawa stepped forward anyway. I used my whole body to block him.
地下室を探せと言ったのはお前だろ。
まさかこんなになっているとは知らなかったのだ。
Yeah, there's a door.
十分、私は恐怖した。だからもう。
Oh no. Hanazawa stared beyond me, his expression unchanging. Was the situation way too familiar? Hesitantly, I turned around. Oh no, my god. A white no mask floated out from the abyss beyond the open door. The figure was difficult to describe. I had a freakish shape It had a wicked shape, as if it had been born from the darkness. He turned his white face and suddenly sank into the black.
花沢まさか行かないよな。
Hanaza swayed the portable lamp to his other hand and pushed me to the side. Still silent, I ended up grabbing his waist and fell to my knees.
やめてくれ。今のはきっと私の幻覚だ。
俺にも見えたぞ。
じゃあ二人しておかしくなったのかもしれん。
There was no way it was human. It had the freakish shape of an ogre.
例えばの話をしよう。今の異形が心優しきものだったとして、お花が大好きで、子供が大好き、蝶よ花よと繊細な乙女だったとしよう。なあ、よく考えろ。いるわけないよな、そんなやつ。直感を大事にしよ
なら、お前は何を感じ取った？
にゃ。
I thought it was going to kill us. I didn't think we could fight it. Instead of saying that, I tightly held into Hanazawa's waist.
頼むよ、花沢。
言っただろ、俺が叩き切ると。
He was an idiot, a real idiot. Didn't he get it? Didn't he sense it? There was no way human could go up against a freaking that. Hanazawa finally kicked me off. Then he ruffled my hair like he always used to do and jumped to the darkness. Either way, this was the end. The wreck was haunting me. There was absolutely no way I would be able to escape this darkness. Hanazawa had also thought about that. I tightly gripped the lamp and ran after him.
これって本棚か?
There were numerous books and canned goods lined up in them. Among them were even cans that had already been opened. Proof that something had been living
まるで
here.
犬のような異形だな。ここは巣穴と呼ぶにふさわしい。
夜な夜な地上に上がっては物を盗んで働いているのだ。違いない。
That's why it was at the store, because we closed it late at night, and usually this thing would come out of the basement late at night, steal like food or something, and then come back. And then this is what it was going to do, but it didn't know that we were there.
嫌に貧乏な異形だな。
Another one nodded calmly before suddenly stopping. He held the portable lamp in his mouth and pulled out his sword. A white mask was peering at us from the end of the bookshelves. Seeing him for a second time, my fear had dwindled, but he tilted his head with a quick, staggered towards us and straightened himself up. Who said he was 6 feet tall? He was easily taller than Hanazawa. Standing there was giant, almost 7 feet tall. Hanazawa spat the portable lamp from his mouth. He grasped his sword in both hands and pointed the tip at the monster. Surprised, the man instantly stopped moving. When I swung the lamp, the light effect on the sword became even more distorted. Perhaps afraid of that light, the man retreated little by little. Was he timid? I suddenly felt like smiling. That's when Hanazawa swung his sword down at an immense speed. I wasn't sure if we would win or lose, but this wasn't a competition. In that moment, though, I saw certain defeat.
花沢。
The monster's arm had shrunk Hanazawa's body faster than Hanazawa could strike his. He hit a bookshelf. The blow causing all tattooed books to rain down. Damn, Hanazawa. The monster arm slipped through the rain of books and grabbed Hanazawa's arm. He snatched the sword away from Hanazawa fast enough to break his fingers, and then he sliced into him from the side. It was a gruesome sight. The left hand Hanazawa had put up to protect himself was cut off. He stopped the sword with the palm of his right hand, which was now barely attached. What? In that one strike, I felt no intelligence or emotion. To the common soldier, that must have been the most frightening kind of attack. Before you try to flee, there's a moment you pray to leave. Hanazawa's thoughts were literally cut off.
花沢
Hanazawa's face rolled away. It stopped right next to the portable lamp, and his eyes closed as if it were too bright. I need to save him, but which should I protect, his body or his head? Although that, however, the back of my hand is pretty heavy. I won't be able to take Hanazawa with me. I let her scream. I ran back the way I would come. Now I knew why trains were so noisy. They were afraid of colliding with the rail cars trailing behind them. I screamed as I ran. I found a stool, but when I looked towards it, I ended up kicking it away. The monster wasn't here yet. I heard fixing the stool and somehow managed to grab it into the floor above. I slipped and slipped. Each time I fell, I didn't look back. Each time my legs went out, the floor above me was swallowed up by the distant darkness. Thinking this was the end, I somehow managed to grab the floor above with my outstretched hand. I grasped it and as hard as I could with the tips of my fingers and desperately climbed up. I took the handle of the lamp out of my mouth and took violent gasps of air with my entire body. There wasn't time to rest. Need to cover it up. Need to cover this door. Don't want to back around. The monster was climbing up the stool. He was looking right up at me. What was this? What was his nightmare? With both arms, I pushed the shelf and used all my strength to drop the books into the floor. I kicked them to the door to block it and piled even more books on top of that.
天使起きてください
I heard the rumbling sound of an impact. The books on the door flew up, and a pale hand slowly exposed a face. The monster was pushing away the mountain of books. I rushed out of Ambassadors, kicking off the ground more violently than the rain. Coming after me, even more vigorously, was the sound of the monster's footsteps.
雨森君、ランプを捨てなさい。
でも
この暗闇に乗じるのだ。
I was definitely the only one carrying around a light in the middle of the night. I was like a firefly, with its ass lit up, giving away my location. I threw the lamp away, breaking it. I can see ahead of me. I finally removed my fake glasses and ran to the darkness. The hadn't changed with my now slightly extended field of vision. When I turned the corner, I suddenly ran into someone.
助けてください。今おかしな男に。
It's him. Hmm. The lightning illuminated none other than the silhouette of that man. It's still on my ass. I was no longer able to move.
貴様一体。悲しい。死ぬのは。
Is dying sad? Why is he asking me that?
春彦さん言いましたよね。
This shapeless idea of a phantom is walking around on its own.
これもやっぱり私の幻想なんじゃ。
In this case, I should just pray for him to disappear. Once late, the man would turn to dust and vanish, and everything would come to a peaceful end. But he wasn't disappearing. He wasn't disappearing.
この男は幻想ではない。
なんとかしてください。
オラが従えられるのは幻想だけだ。
Damn.
こんな現実あってたまるか。
My wandering hand happened to pick up an empty bottle. The lightning illuminated me as I lifted the large, costly bottle. I aimed for the monster's face and threw it as hard as I could. The mask had cracked with a sound like a flower blooming. Pieces of the mask hit the muddy ground. Instead of picking it up, the man hit his face with both hands. I wasn't sure what had happened. I missed any vital spot. And yet the man was stumbling back, clearly in distress. His breathing was extremely erratic.
逃げなさい、玉森くん。逃げなさい。
Haruhiko-san's voice suddenly brought me to my senses. I quickly dashed back past the monster. The sound of thunder was getting even louder. The rain and wind blew even more fiercely through Jumbocho. And because of that, I wanted to cry even more. Nothing made sense. Minakami was dead. Hanazo was also dead. Would I be able to escape? Even if morning came, wouldn't he come matching for me every night? What a terrible story. I was going to be killed by a man who looked exactly like the phantom I had created.
終わりだ。私の夢はもう。
夢？
Why? Why? Why?
私ばかりがこんな目に。な。
Suddenly my foot got caught in a deep puddle. The cold water filled the bottom of my shoe and instantly swallowed up my ankle. I tripped and fell. And then I was suddenly on the streetcar. What? My arms was crossed and my legs spread apart as I tried to project the tough guy look as usual. No, wait, I mean, I was sitting there full of confidence. Hadn't I just been dashing through the rain? I wasn't really calm about that. Instead, I was unexpectedly annoyed. Nakami was beside me.
みなかみ？
What? He probably heard me, but like always, I was observed in a book. My frustration increased, and I naturally began to fidget. Nakame seemed to be ignoring me for the 100th time.
おい、みなかみ。
どうした？
どうしたもこうしたもない。何を読んでいるのだ？
What the hell?
ドグラマグラだ。夢の旧作
Again,
の
this
最新刊だ
damn
よ。
book.
ずいぶんやらしい表紙だな。
至って純粋な怪奇小説だよ。
お前もやっぱりワイダンが好きなのか？
ってだから、これはワイダンじゃない。
そう恥じらうな。お前も男だからな。
うん。まあいっか。
Whatever. Oh, it is a dream, but this wasn't just a dream. It was a tough. It was through someone where turned the pages of my memories of the past and reading them back to me. At the moment I was pretending to be calm while feeling a little bit of jealous of this. Sorry. At the moment, I was pretending to be calm while feeling a little bit jealous of this Kyosaku Yumeno.
なあ、みなかみ。もし、私がワイダンを書いたら、喜んでくれるか？
え？
近頃、卑猥な作品が人気あるという。お前もそうして読んでいるようにな。
でも、体験もないのに書けるのか？
バカにするなよ。
周りに流される必要はないよ。お前は書きたいものを書けばいい。
だが飽きやしないか？お前が私の物語に。
そんなことないよ。俺はずっとお前の一番の読み手でいる。
Number 1.
玉森の原稿を読むことが生きがいだからな。そう何度も言ってるだろ。
I'm gonna cry again. Liar.
今度地下室の怪人を川瀬に見せるらしいな。あいつもきっと楽しんでくれるよ。ほっと。俺も楽しみにしているからな。あの続き。
You liar.
ああ、雨が止んだ。よかったよかった。俺のてるてる坊主が聞いたかな。
Teoterbozo. Teoterbozo is a small doll made from paper that is hung outside of windows as a charm against bad weather. 1. Isn't it raining now? Rain fell in drops from the gray sky. Cold rain fell into my right eye, and the sharp pain jagged my ankle. What a terrible dream. His feelings, all of them, all of this, everything was his fault. Rain, people, rail tracks. Morning. One by one noted every strange thing I saw. When I glanced around, I saw that people were looking at me with their eyes wide. What's going on? Everyone will be fine, but the moment I tried to ask, the streetcar was blowing its horn right behind me. I clambered up and escaped this one problem. Oh my god, we almost died. I clutched my bare chest when I turned around. The conductor was glaring at me with a face full of rage. When he saw the children on the side of the street, though, he smiled cheerfully and waved at them. Kids were fascinated by the streetcar, so an exchange like this was like a parade for them. I had unintentionally ended up catching a glimpse of the conductor's humanity. I fell to the side of the road as a few cars zonked at me. I looked at the dim, rainy sky in a daze. But what exactly happened here? I was being chased by that phantom. My foot had gotten stuck in the mud. I must have passed out until
玉
daybreak.
森さん、おまわり行きましょうよ。
Please, let's go to police.
ああ、そうだ。
Hanazawa had been murdered. His head was cut off in one strike, and he died without any last words. My hands shook and my entire body tensed.
だから立ってください、玉森さん。
ああ、ああ。
That's what I said, but my legs weren't working and I couldn't stand. Just then, with perfect time, a police officer passed in front of me. He looked down at me as I were a lowly creature, then cast me from his sights with a scoff. I felt like running away too, but I wrapped my arms around my knees and buried my head between
どう
them.
して呼び止めなかったんですか？言っちゃいましたよ。
だってあの目。
信じてもらえないと思ったのかね。
No one will believe him. And so the frogman and I were petrified. Haruhiko-san went on in an awfully calm voice.
まずはあそこに戻ってみたらどうだろう。
梅鉢堂にですか？
君自身が確信を持ちなさい。店主の安否も心配ではないね。
天使もそうですね。心配は心配です。
When head down came to find out, I'll probably have to go back there. When I tried to get up, the ground trembled beneath my feet. For a brief moment, a large earthquake shook the town. Signboards shook, people were shaken. Thank goodness I wasn't going crazy. The earthquake seemed to be a disaster everyone could see. On my way back to the shop, I saw a large coffee bottle by the side of the
これっ
road.
て怪人の顔にパコッとやったやつですよね。
It is. It sure did look like it. The label was date red, but that swell smell was definitely coffee. They saved me last night. It instantly felt familiar in my hand, and my vision sharpened. This was the only weapon I had to drive him away. I reached my back door and timidly opened one of the doors. There didn't seem to be anyone here. I called out to the shopkeeper from the half-open door.
はい。
He responded in his usual way. I hesitated, but the frogman pushed me on the back and I strongly opened the doors. You're right, I had this huge coffee bottle in my hand. Now my teeth were clenched and even my steps were full of determination. However, nothing in the shop looked any different from the day before. In fact, the old books that should have been scattered about were back in their places. And most importantly, the door Hanazawa had damaged was back to normal. I'll say it again. It was back to normal.
近づいてみなさい。
そんなことしなくてもわかりますよ。
理解を伴っているようには見えないが。
I acknowledged what was in front of me, but like Haruhiko-san said, I still couldn't understand it. I slowly approached the door, grabbed the small handle and pulled. The door didn't budge. Make the handle jiggle.
この扉を直したのは店主ですか？
扉？何のことだい？
What? I felt like being bitter and telling him that if he had time to fix a door like this, he should at least put a lock on the front door. Tumebachido. Yeah, but the shopkeeper didn't seem to know anything, so I finally stopped pulling at the door. I just quietly brought my hands together and prayed instead. Hanazawa. I rested his name in my heart over and over again. After reminiscing for a while, I buried the door under all the books I could, just in case.
玉森さん、やっぱりおまわりさんのところへ行きましょう。
ああ、そうだな。そうだ、行かなければ。
I'll go to the police. I'll bring an officer here and confirm Hanadawa's death. Kawase would most like to be the one to identify his corpse. He'd blame me to no end. This would probably make him lose it completely. I didn't want to see him like that. My eyes were dry. Instead of closing them, I covered them with my hands and slowly sank to the floor.
なんで私ばかりこんな目に。店主、ただいま戻りました。
Huh? The voice of a young man suddenly echoed through the shop. Moreover, it was my voice, wasn't it? When I looked from to the gaps between the bookshelves, I saw me standing there. He crudely shook the bags of water off of his umbrella and tossed it against the wall.
はい。
Even the shopkeeper responded like he usually did. Then without noticing me at all, I hurriedly went up the stairs. No, I should say I crouched down so he wouldn't notice me.
どうなってるんでしょう。
わからん。
What was that just now? Was there a me with the same face as me? I crawled out from the shadow of the bookshelves and stuck my head outside. When I did, water splashed down. Yes, where had I seen this scene before? The man stopped in front of me. A red umbrella, sleepy eyes, heavy-looking cloth, but in his right hand, he was looking up and didn't seem to notice me down at his feet. I crawled back behind the bookshelves and stared at his face from between the gaps.
水上さんですよね。
Yes, it was Minakami, no doubt about it. But how? Most I came from his gaping mouth.
相変わらず雑だな。
みなかみ、ちょうどよかったな。私も今帰ったところだ。
Nakami seemed to be having a conversation with the guy on the second floor.
うん、ちょうどよかった。
It was from the first
またお
episode.
前の言う通り雨が降ったぞ。おかげでほとんど濡れずに済んだ。
It is? So no, no.
そうか。
どうした？なんだか元気がないな。
いや、金魚を素手で掴むなよ。
Yeah, it is a conversation of the first episode.
金魚屋の親父だってそうしてただろ
でもかわいそうだ。
う。なんだ、私に文句があるのか？
文句というか、金魚飼育の助言というか。
金魚屋の親父がこれでいいと言ったからそうしたまでだ。
売り物の金魚もいっぱい死んでただろ
う。ああ、なんでだろうな。
どうした？今日はやけに気が立ってるな。まるで
What the
川瀬
hell?
みたいに横暴だ。
Minakami twirled his umbrella. He nearly shook the water droplets of it and slowly came into the shop.
Hmm?
I gasped and turned around. When I turned back, he had already headed far into the shop. He hadn't seemed to notice me. What the hell? I didn't do anything. Before the man that looked like me came downstairs. He sat at the counter and lazily rested his chin in his hand. Munakami, in his Munakami way, slid book after book into the bookshelf behind me. Right when I was afraid one of his hands was going to touch me, the other hand started to foam lethargically.
適当でいいのだ、みなかみ。ここは目的があって来る場所じゃない。適当に眺め、適当に手に取る。それが梅鉢堂の面白さだ。
そういうことだったのか。吉屋の隣に類香が並んでいるのを見てから、この店はおかしいと思っていたが。
Munakami nodded in understanding as he continued to return the books to the shelf. His hands moving as if he were tracing constellations.
だからお前な。
なあ玉森、今気がついたんだが、やはり無意味なんてことはないよ。いろはにほへと。ほら、例えば類香の80万年後の社会の隣には吉屋の花物語が並んでる。本の題名順に並べられているんだ。
It's just like this first
そ
episode.
れを適当というのだ。
Annoyed, the man stood up. Tamamori, I'll leave this to you. After flying up at Minakami, for whatever reason, he seemed to be persuaded to take some books. The man came closer. I slowly lay down and covered my mouth, so not even my breath could escape. But well, why did I have to hide? I switched from my strange sense of panic to anger. Whenever I was feeling impulsive and not thinking straight, it was always an expectation for something not so great to happen. So I trusted my instincts and continued to cover my mouth. Despite that, the frogman between my legs was trying to look past the bookshelf. I had somehow managed to keep him still.
結局、3日間で何冊読んだんだ
20冊は借りたかな。
20冊って。
I hadn't even read that many books
新
with
作は
you.
入れたか。
1ヶ月前から何も変わっていないぞ。
そうか。
残念そうだなって。まさかここにある本全部読破したのか？
おそらく。もうピンとくる題名はないから。
I have 4,000 books. This was a conversation I'd had before. And during the conversation, I should have been standing in the same place as that guy. Oh, jeez, I don't understand any of this.
玉森さん、玉森さん、出て行って怒鳴り散らしてやりましょうよ。
怒鳴り散らして何になる？バレたら殺される。
That's just how it was. Munakami should have been dead for some reason. There were two of me. These men were definitely somebody's meant to take her place. If they found out I was alive, I would surely be killed. Terminate.
奥さんから招待券をいただいたんだ。ご婦人方は怪奇映画に興味がないそうだ。
そりゃそうだ。女子供には分からんよ。
けど、お前が忙しいんじゃな。
行かない理由がない。
These guys are following the same lines from 3 days ago. They must have been meticulously observing us so they could replace us. In other words, this man wasn't
そん
Munakami.
な口頭無形
だったらこの事態を何とする？何と受け入れればいい？
The frogman tilted his head as he turned to dust and disappeared. I straightened out my lowered leg and pulled out forelimbs in toward my chest.
もう行くのか？
テートに古い友人が来ているんだ。これから会いに行ってくる。
私の知り合いか？
ああ、いや。どうだろう。
どうだろう。
Vacant smiled, the man left me by
勉強も頑張れよ。田舎に残したばあさんのためにもな。
そう。
That nothing to do with this. At least I had no choice but to believe this aberrancy.
玉森くん、ちょっと散歩してくるよ。
ああ、はい。
店番お願いします。
The shopkeeper was still a shopkeeper. He didn't seem to find anything wrong or out of the ordinary about me or the other me speaking to him. Feeling a little jealous, I lifted myself up. With Menachem gone, I sat there with a tremendously worried look on my face. He stood, further dusting his hand, and of all things, he began to clean the shop. What was with this guy? Normally, I would never clean. Yeah, if I remember well, in the first episode, we followed Minakami the way back. And then I think we followed him. Yeah, if I think right, we followed him. Usually I would say something lazy like discovering old books gives them value they never had. I frantically turned around and clenched my teeth in annoyance. He suddenly stopped moving right behind me. Hesitantly glanced to the side. He was leaning against the bookshelf, just like me. He slowly sank down to the floor. I can relax, I guess. I thought, but then he noisily stood up and ran the short distance to the register as fast as he could. Ink, a pen, 10 brand new manuscript pages. He pulled autos out of the drawers, then lay on the floor and began to subscribe blow out his writing. Subscribe blow. I picked up from the bookshelves and coldly looked down at his eccentric behavior. It looked like this was my chance. Now would be the only time I could get past him. Full of confidence, I ran out from the bookshelves and went out into the world beyond the front door. Tom, what is story? Even if I asked the fake me, I doubt he would answer. I jumped into the streetcar that was passing by just then and headed to the usual cafe. Readers looked surprised.
綺麗好きの帝大生は来ているか？
今さっき帰られました。
If she actually understood who I was talking about, I think I was homophobe, but really was that explained. The waiters looked at me with confusion for some reason, seeing that baby face of hers suddenly made me hungry. Maybe my frustration earlier had been because of my stomach. I took a seat without assistance and gave my order to the waitress without looking at the menu.
オムレツライスとカルスピ。
まだ食べられるんですか？
Not still, this was my first meal today. I didn't feel like explaining, so I turned my face away. The waitress shrugged to show how much she didn't care. She threatened away towards the kitchen. Why skip it alone? I looked out the window blankly and watched the sky.
玉森くん、何を悩んでいるのだ？
How do we close? Oh, the man and the frog. And here I was, crazy enough to no longer feel anything about that.
何がどうなっているかわからないんです。どうして私が陥れられているのか。
陥れられる？
春彦さん、私はヒステリーを起こしているんでしょうか？
I don't know what is happening. Hanan got here just by taking it to the car and walking. I thought over the situation and again came up with an answer.
芥川龍之介の小説にドッペルゲンゲルについて書かれた話があるんです。
Doppelganger?
二つの手紙という書簡形式のお話です。
I don't think it's
知って
doppelganger.
いるよ。ドッペルゲンゲルに悩まされる男の話だ。
それと同じなんですよ。私にそっくりな何者かがいて、私になりすまそうと騙しているのに違いないんです。
君なんかになりすまして何になろうというのだろ
う。わかりません。私には。
そう。君という人間には何の価値もない。水上くんと花沢くんが何者かに狙われるのは無理ないだろう。だが君には何の価値もない。何の価値もない。
3度も言う必要ありますか？
だから、おかしいと思わんかね、玉森くん。
Haruiko-san struck the table with a thud. Even the fragments on the lid straightened it up and trembled as if the motion were directed at him. But the omelette rice that came right at that moment made my eyes sparkle.
本当に食べきれますか？
なんだその口の利き方は。私は分子だぞ。
浪人生も分子のうちに入るんですか？
なぜそれを？
分子さんはお腹が空きやすいんですね。
This woman, she was so sassy with me.
玉森くん、見よこの景色。床はまだ濡れている。これは先の地震で川瀬くんがこぼしたコーヒーだ。
The earthquake earlier.
そ
Yeah,
して
it
この
was
女の胸元に
the
は
same
茶
day.
色く汚れた刺繍のハンカチ。
なんなんですか？
Is it the same day or it's like...
時は流動性だ。なのになぜ3日前と同じ景色に君はいるのか。
When I split my omelette rice in half, it was red inside.
ねえ分子さん、私の提案でお米の代わりにトマトを丸ごと入れてみたんですよ。どうですか？美味しそうでしょ？
それはオムレツライスと呼ばん。ヘドが出そうだ。
へえ、ひどいです。
I knew it was the same thing from 3 days ago. I knew that. Since the moment I saw Minakami I realized was 3 days in the past. I also knew that at the moment, the me in Wazdo was riding away.
でも信じられるわけないじゃないですか。
So we came to the past. What?
これは悪い夢だ。
玉森くん、
春彦さんも消えてください。一人で考えたいんです。
いいから懐を探ってみなさい。
I went to my pockets and pulled out the honorary silver pocket watch and the goldfish watering can.
金魚長老。いや、金魚長老。
そっちではない。懐中時計を見なさい。
The silver pocket watch Hanazawa had given to me. Without being told to, I checked it against the cafe's clock. It was off by 2 hours. My watch was ahead.
君は時間を跳躍している。 君は今、3日後の世界から帰ってきたのだ。
バカな。
And I'm gonna end it here. Let me see. So we travel to the past. We found our friend, our old friend. He was killed. Lots of things happened in this episode. Oh my god. I really enjoy it and I'm really up to see what's gonna happen next. So if you like it, stay up with me. And please, I hope you have enjoyed it. I love you. And keep going and have Pride Month. Bye bye.